Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at the Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place, another land.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love to do without sacrificing what's important to them. It hurts my heart when I see business owners feel like the business is running their life versus them having a life, and the business is the conduit to making that happen. So today we have Elizabeth Sherman, all the way from Mexico, that is on. And I want to tell you a little bit, those of you that have been listening know I kind of do this, that I met Elizabeth through an international women's networking program called FemCity. I don't have enough positive things to say about it, and go out and check it out. And one of the things that we do in that is have coffee chats with each other. And Elizabeth and I connected fairly early when I started, and just really hit it off. And we have very similar philosophies about different things. And so I said to her, I'd love to have you on my podcast and talk about what you do and how you lead your own lit up life. So I'm going to have her introduce herself, and that way you kind of have a better idea of what she does. And then we're going to just dig into the conversation. So your turn, Elizabeth.
Hi, first of all, I am so excited about this talk that we're going to have. I think it's going to be tons of fun. So I am Elizabeth Sherman. I am a life and health coach for women in midlife. And so what I do is, well, first of all, like midlife, which can span like between perimenopause, menopause. We don't like to admit it, but like 45 really is midlife, right? But sorry, didn't mean to offend anyone.
And Elizabeth, what I'm finding too is when you're talking about perimenopause, I was told, I don't know if this is true, maybe you can answer this, that you can actually have symptoms 10 years prior to going through menopause.
Absolutely. Yes.
You might be 45, but having symptoms at 35.
Absolutely. And what I find is that, to get off track already, there are actually 5 different stages of menopause or reproduction. And so it's, when we're in the, reproducing phase, and then there's perimenopause, which is when we start to have our hormonal fluctuations where our body is getting ready to stop producing the hormones that allow us to reproduce. And then there's menopause, which is just one day in time. And then after that, there's 2 phases. There's post-menopause, and then there's like far post-menopause. And so perimenopause will, I don't want to say mirror, but the amount of time that you go through perimenopause is likely to also span the amount of time that you go through the initial stage of menopause. And so you can be in perimenopause, menopause for decades. And we do not talk about that enough. Yeah.
Talking about reproductive. Elizabeth shared with me before we got on that she has a dog that might be wearing a diaper because he's in heat, and he just kind of walked behind her. So that was perfect timing. So I'm sorry, because this is what I love about Elizabeth. We start talking and we go in all these different angles. So I don't know if there was something else you wanted to talk about what you do in the world and how you show up in service, but.
Well, so I think that there are so many things that are happening to women during this time. Their body is changing. Life is changing. So their kids are going away to school. And what that facilitates then is a change in relationships, not only like female relationships or partner relationships, but also their primary relationship, because their kids are going away to school and their work starts to have different dynamics, and like their parents start needing them because their parents are getting older. And so there's a lot of support that these women need. And I also want to suggest that we go into retirement. So these are women who are pre-retirement. We've been sold this idea of the American dream where we have to work, 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 work until we retire. And then when we retire, we can start living our life, right? We can start living our lit up life.
Which is
And
such a lie. Sorry.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so many people do not have the health means to live the retirement that we've been promised. And so we really need to be paying attention to our health now versus when we retire, because we're not going to have the time and, yeah, ability to make up that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So tell me, because this word health, I love words that are ambiguous, but I always kind of laugh because I joke in the fact that words matter, right? And words
Mhm.
are matter. And I'll be skiing with someone and they're like, oh, because I try to do a black diamond every year when I'm skiing, like a new one.
Yeah.
But that's not where I love to hang out. I like to hang out on the blues or the really easy black diamonds. And so they'll say to me, oh, well, this is a really easy black diamond. And I just said it too, right? And easy means one thing to one person and another to another person based on filters, based on our experiences, those types of things. So define for me what you see as health, right?
Yeah, that is a big question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So typically when people come to me, when women come to me, we think about our physical health.
Mhm.
And most women think about their appearance and their weight. And we do that because we've been socialized to believe that the most important thing about us is our appearance. And so most people come to me talking about their physical health.
Mhm.
At some point, it stops being about the abs and the arms and starts being about, I just want to feel good in my clothes.
Yeah.
But what I think that a lot of people don't realize is how interconnected our physical health is with our mental and our emotional health. In fact, I was on a call yesterday with one of my clients, and we've really been working a lot with her emotions.
Yeah.
And it's something that I really have had an awakening within my own life, that before I started doing all of this, I say that I was flatlined.
Mhm.
So I used to call myself even keeled or, just chill. Like nothing really got me too riled up and nothing really got me too riled or down.
That's also safe, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what I realize now, being on the other side of that emotional awakening, is that I think about emotions as like a sine wave.
Mhm.
And when we realize that negative emotions just don't feel bad, or they feel bad, we don't want to experience them. And so I think that I was trying to eliminate that lower half of the spectrum and say, well, I just want to live in the happy place.
Yeah.
But you can only go as high as you go low,
Yeah.
right?
The law of polarity. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so I really had to start experiencing all of those negative emotions. And what's happened to me is I've stopped binging. I've stopped emotionally eating because of it, because I'm allowing myself to be with these emotions that we usually distract ourselves from through either eating or Netflixing or working or, just being, every woman is like busy. I'm busy, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, yesterday I was on this call with my client, and I don't think that she really realized when she came to me, but she's very appreciative now of how much time we've been spending on emotions.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I'm so glad you're going to talk about this and that we're talking about this because I'm going to share a little bit with me too. I used to do that too, right? And I still do it sometimes, right? Because we go down that well-worn path sometimes. And oh gosh, this was, I don't even know how long. Well, my son's 32 and he was 4. So that gives you an indication of how long ago this was.
28.
my then ex or my now ex-husband, then husband, went through 30 days of rehab. And he was an addict and an alcoholic. And going there, one of the final ceremonies, because the AA kind of logo is a coffee cup, they had the family, and my son was there too, and painted a little styrofoam cup. And then I painted a saucer, and I painted the bottom half of it just black, right? Because it's easier to not feel anything
Mhm.
than it was to feel the pain, right? To
Yeah.
feel those things that don't feel the best all the time. And I was overwhelmed with all the different types of emotions. And I got involved here in Idaho with a group called Responsible Living. And they broke it down for me. I'm the type of person, don't let me, I don't like Designer Shoe Warehouse for those of you in the States because there's too many options. I don't want that many options. So when emotions, you look at like Brene Brown's book, I haven't been able to read it yet because there's too much for me, right?
Mm.
And there's a lot of nuances. I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to read it, but in that group, they talk about that there's four basic emotions. And that was so enlightening to me: mad, sad, glad, or afraid. And
Mhm.
most emotions will fit underneath one of those four things. So to start out, when you're
Yeah.
just starting to tap more into the emotional piece of it, it was so helpful for me to only have those four. And to your point, as I build my emotional capacity or my EQ, my IQ goes up, so my intellect, my physical health gets better. My like also I would even kind of invite that there's a spiritual connection here too, right? Like my
Absolutely.
mental health, my intellectual health, my emotional health, and my physical health are all together, right? And
Mhm.
and there's I get tired of hearing people say too, oh, it's what you put in your mouth and how much you expend. I don't find that to be the case all the time, right? Like there's other chemical responses that sometimes happen. And spending years, I'm not afraid to say I'm 57, and spending years eating hot dogs at two football games a week when my son was in high school doesn't necessarily do the best thing for your gut, right? So then there's
Mhm.
things that I do to have to come back from that. But I'm so glad you're talking about emotional health because you've heard of Louise Hay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this whole idea that the issues are in our tissues, right? These emotions that we hang on to, and releasing those releases. Like I stopped saying I'm losing weight because losing something infers I'm going to refine it,
Yes.
right? Like I want to shed, I want to get rid
Mhm.
of. And so keep talking. Sorry, I got off on a little tangent there, but I think
No.
the emotional piece of it is so important. And I don't know about you, but that's part of this lit up life for me. I don't want to be in that space where I'm feeling nothing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
do I have a hard time sometimes expressing, like I don't cry easily. It's not that I don't want to. I don't know if I have dry tear ducts or what, but like being able to express like joy, and like it's so much fun. And if it means that I have to have pain or I have to have some like deep thoughts into my shadow self, then so be it, because that helps us grow, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think when we're talking about emotions, so one, I like your idea of the negative, the four emotions. When I started going through this, I felt like my emotions were more like a ball of yarn,
Yeah,
that
there's
they
so
were all very tied up together, and I didn't know how to tease them apart. So like one of the things that I first do with my clients is I have them do what's called a body scan.
Mhm.
As women, we walk around with these like bodiless heads. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about the past. We're worrying about what's going to happen next. We're planning. We have the mental load of our families, and we don't consider our bodies. And, but our bodies are incredibly wise, and our bodies are where our emotions live. And our bodies we can only feel in the moment. We can't feel in the past, and we can't feel in the future. And so, one of the first things I do with my clients is I teach them what's called a body scan, which allows them to. We're doing this for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is to understand how hunger feels in our body. and also how emotions feel in our body. And why we do this is because oftentimes we feel many different emotions at the same time. And in fact, yesterday something happened and I was feeling shame and discouragement and disappointment and anger and sadness and all of those different emotions I never would have been able to pinpoint before.
Yeah.
But the more in touch I get with what each of those emotions feels like, I can start teasing them apart and pulling that ball of yarn away from it so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Because what tends to happen for us is that if we aren't in touch with our emotions, so what was happening with me was that even though I was quote unquote even keeled, I was also very reactionary. So when someone would say something to me, I would just pop off something back to them, and I would feel lots of regret and shame afterwards. But we don't want to talk about that.
Right.
And what paying attention to my emotional state has done for me now is that when an event occurs, there's a great Viktor Frankl quote that says, in between stimulus and response is a space. And in that space is our ability to respond. And so the more that we are in touch with our emotions, the more we can respond and decide how we want to react or what we want to do in response. And so how this works with my work with my clients is that when I feel triggered through anxiety or whatever, I'm not just shoving cookies in my mouth. I'm actually getting to decide, do I want to eat cookies? And full disclosure here, folks, I sometimes still decide that I am going to eat emotionally. Yeah. But having the awareness, having the knowledge that I am doing it allows me to curtail it a little bit.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, what the hell was that?
Right. It's the mindfulness that then helps us stop and not have potentially the guilt and shame. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about this idea of emotion and feeling. We're going to talk more about this whole like response versus reaction and how eating emotionally is still okay, being mindful about it, and then making sure we don't fall into guilt and shame. So we're going to take a quick second and we'll be right back. Let's face it, sometimes as an entrepreneur and a business leader, we need some guidance, support, and community. So we here at The Lit Up Life have 3 ways that you can work with us in order to achieve that. As a private client, we work together to quantum leap your business by discovering strategies to help you move past what's holding you back and allow you to identify what you want your life to look like. The result, your business becomes the conduit to the lifestyle, success, and impact that you intend. Now, I'm a huge believer in the power of collaboration. So in our community masterminds, you can join in with other high vibrational business owners who want to level up, increase impact, and financial gain, all with a tribe of other women to support and encourage you on your journey. Currently, we're accepting application for this women's mastermind group, which is a year-long program for women in business who are ready for that next level of success. We create deep personal awareness in a safe and supportive space where you can experience growth with others who are on that same path. Through weekly sessions with our program coaches, teachings that go beyond the buzzwords, and immersive retreats in places like Mexico, the Dominican Republic, or Belize, we work together to create long-term abundance and lasting impact in your life and business. The last and final way to get involved with us is our group coaching programs. They provide the opportunity for teaching, masterminding, and feeling like you aren't alone on this ride. Come join us. Okay, we are back and we are going to chat. I want to back up because we just unpacked a whole lot of stuff there. First of all, I love that we're so in alignment here too, because to me, there's a difference between emotion and feeling. Right? Like if I feel something in my body, that is usually attached to an emotion. And the more emotionally adept I get, the more I'm able to attach like what is the emotion around that, and then where is the emotion coming from? Like I know when I would go talk to customer service agents, it takes me 0 to 60 to get heated up really quickly. And
Yeah.
it took me some time to unwind that and realize it's because I don't feel listened to. And there's
Yeah.
many times in my life I didn't feel listened to, right? So
Mm.
now I know that I don't have to have that pit in my stomach and that feeling of like I need to be able to shout something. And I felt it in my body, realized what the emotion which was anger. And now I have tools to set myself up because I know they're not listening to me. They're doing their job and reading a script and being okay with that. So tell me a little bit more about how you've helped people get in touch with the body, because the body does tell us so much. And then what you do to help them if they struggle with connecting that to an emotion.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I use a tool that is part of cognitive behavior therapy.
Okay.
And the tool is basically the think, feel, act cycle. And
Yeah.
so for all of us, everything that we do and we don't do is because of an emotion. So I like to use the example of you've decided that you are going to go for a run. And when you're supposed to go for the run, you're actually sitting there on the couch. Okay. Now that emotion is actually resistance. Okay. And, or it might be, fear of pain, because let's be honest, exercising hurts, right? Not just physically, but also sometimes emotionally when we're first starting. We have that voice in the back of our head that says, this is gonna, or this hurts. How did you let yourself get so far off plan? Like, why did you do this to yourself? And so, like, there's a huge emotional pain that we just want to avoid, right? And so, what's interesting about that, though, is that all diets and exercise programs tell us what to do. They don't tell us what to do if we don't want to do. They're just like, no, just follow the plan. And so, what I help my clients with is figuring out how I have a discovery call, which is the I know what to do, I'm just not doing it discovery call, right? Because we all know what we're supposed to be doing. We all know we're supposed to be eating vegetables and, drinking water and all of that great stuff, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the reason that we do or don't do anything is because of the emotion that we're feeling, whether it's resistance, whether it's fear, whether it's desire and wanting. Like that's why we eat the cookie, is because we desire it. We want to feel pleasure, right? And then what precedes the feeling is our thoughts. Okay. And so our thoughts about the cookie, our thoughts about exercising.
Yeah.
And so the think, feel, act cycle is that our thoughts create our feelings, which then influence our actions, which then create our results. Right.
Right. Right.
And so I think everyone's a little bit different in terms of, are you aware of your thoughts or are you more in touch with your feelings? And so for me, I'm more in touch with my emotions, which is really surprising considering where I started from.
Yeah.
But I find it easier, and maybe it's just because of the body scan that's more of like a red flag to me, that I start noticing, oh, something's coming up for me, whether it's, embarrassment because I feel my cheeks flush and my face get hot. And so we just, through that tool is actually how I help my clients decipher what they are feeling and then how that feeling influences their decisions.
Yeah, I love that. And Elizabeth, as you talked about that, and we're talking about pleasure, it got me to thinking, because I don't know about you, and my guess would be similar, but I run into a lot of female clients that I work with. We are taught that we shouldn't have pleasure,
Absolutely.
right? Or pleasure are those guilty pleasures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're taught it's bad, it's negative,
Yeah.
and And so what I find is a lot of times, and I know this was a realization I had, that part of why I was putting things in my body, like I'm not a big sugar person. I'm more of a salt person for my
Mhm.
adrenal stuff, right? But like I found myself like craving sugar. And I remember, this is kind of embarrassing to say, but I remember back in my 30s, like buying those tubs of nasty, and if people still do this, I'm sorry, I'm putting all these qualifiers on it, but that nasty, like pre-made frosting
Mm-hmm.
chocolate. And
Yeah.
I would take a spoonful of peanut butter and a spoonful of that frosting. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I would go out and eat that.
Yeah.
And it was not necessarily that I was craving that. Some would say I had a sugar crash in the middle of the night or something, but ultimately I didn't have a lot of pleasure in my life.
Yeah.
And so what I found is that sometimes my eating was because I wanted pleasure in my life, but then it created this cycle of I beat myself up for eating the crap or doing and it went into this like cycle. And it's so refreshing to have people like you and others that are kicking people out of this diet culture. I'm just thrilled with that. So tell me about that. Like, what do you find in the work that you do and how did that impact you? And then I want to talk a little bit about you and how you're leading your lit up life.
Well, so going back to diet culture, like when we label foods as good and bad,
Yeah.
that ultimately denies us pleasure. Like we all know cognitively that
Yes.
we should be able to experience pleasure, but like we don't because again, like the Dove chocolate slogan is it's your guilty pleasure,
Right.
right? And when we think about sex, sex is pleasurable, but women aren't supposed to enjoy it, right? There's a whole stigma
Yeah.
with women about that. So
Which I call
you're right
BS
on.
on.
I'm sorry.
Which I call BS on, but yeah.
Right. Um, and so what happens if you're someone who overeats or eats too many treats, like the frosting and the peanut butter, like that lights up all of the dopamine receptors right there because you've got sugar, you've got fat, and you've got salt. Beautiful. But what happens is we eat the chocolate. We tell ourselves, I should be able to eat the chocolate, right? Moderation, right? We're all told moderation is okay. So I eat the cookie, I eat the chocolate covered almonds, but as I'm eating them, I have this voice in the back of my head that says, you don't deserve this. You haven't been good enough. Whatever the voice is saying is completely ruining our experience of that thing that we're eating. And so we can't really enjoy it. And so what started out as a quest for pleasure now gets ruined. And so that's when we start saying, well, that wasn't enough. I want another. And then I want another. And then I want another because we keep ruining our experience. And so if we just allow ourselves to have the chocolate and just experience the pleasure, then we don't have to overeat because one is enough.
Right. And it's interesting because as you talk, part of what I teach is transactional analysis, which is the committee in your head and how we have the critic or the critical parent and
Mm-hmm.
or nurturing parent, and then we have the adolescent and the child and the adult. And the child is the one that's seeking the pleasure, right? And so when the critic comes out, and the critic's job is to keep us safe, but we can also say, and I've said it out loud, like, thank you very much for that, but please sit down and be quiet, right? Like I can't hear you right now. And then allowing that little girl to experience that pleasure, because what happens is when we go into that, then the adolescent comes out, and because they're standing in between the critic and the child, the little girl shrivels up a little bit, and then this person gets tired and worn out and they're irritated. And then it's just this whole vibrational energy thing that just gets crazy. And so I
Mm-hmm.
found sometimes if I can tell the inner critic, you know what? I appreciate you. You're part of me, but I need for you to sit down because I'm making a mindful choice. And that's the adult saying, I'm making a mindful choice here. And I'm going to flip right back into my young child and just enjoy this. Right. Like I think about little babies, little kids, like just how much they enjoy things and they're like in it. Right. And that's to me, like the more we can do that and almost over exaggerate it when it's happening,
Mm-hmm.
like I think
Yeah.
the more, because I find the more I do those things, it's almost like constant space repetition, right? Like the more I do it, the more comfortable it feels. When I
Yeah.
talk about let's get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, it's like that's part of what happens. So, Elizabeth, I know we have like just touched on things. We could probably have an hour long podcast here. So we might have to do a second one in 2025. But
Yes, please.
I so appreciate you being here. And I want to ask you before we get off, there's two key questions I always ask. And one of them is, and I know like music's not a big deal for you, but I know you had a couple of books that you wanted to share. And so, what are a couple of books that you find really important that you would highly recommend to people that they pick up and read?
Yeah. So one is actually more of a business book, but
Okay.
it also definitely works for health. And it's something that I work with my clients on. And it's called The Gap and the Gain. It's written
I'm talking
by
about it all the
Benjamin.
time.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, great. Yeah, because when we are on like a weight loss goal, for example, we think about how many pounds we still have to lose. And so if we can look at our progress instead of where we still have to go, then it completely changes our relationship with our health.
Yeah, that works for thoughts, all sorts of things. People will be like, "Oh, I'm so frustrated that I did this thing again." And I'm like, "Well, I'm celebrating because it took you 2 days instead of 2 years, right?"
Yeah.
Like there's that whole gain. We always say the Gap is just a clothing store and we don't shop there anymore.
Love it.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Second book.
The second book is it touches actually on some of the themes that we've talked about today, and it's called On Our Best Behavior, and it's a book by her name is Elise Loehnen. It was she wrote it and released it last summer, so August of 2023 is when I read it, and it literally changed my life. It's structured around the seven deadly sins, and each chapter, so the title of the book is On Our Best Behavior. The subtitle is The Price Women Pay to Be Good.
Hmm.
And so it goes through each of the seven deadly sins and how we have been socialized as women to, and even if you're an atheist or Jewish or another religion other than Christian, this book is so right on because the seven deadly sins are just part of our culture.
Mhm.
The one chapter that really changed my life was the chapter on envy.
Mhm.
And why it changed my life is because when I don't know that I had a really good relationship with other women. And I realized after reading that book that it's because we have been socialized to see other women as competitors and and it's not cool to be envious of women. And so, like, when we see another woman, so let's say you're eating dinner with your partner or girlfriends or whoever, and you see a woman walk into the restaurant, and you're like, I don't like her. I don't know why I don't like her, but I don't like her. It's because she has something that you want.
Hmm.
And so it's really brought up this awareness now of wanting for me. Like, what is it that I do want? And so now when I meet other women and there's something that rubs me the wrong way, I ask myself, why is that? What does she do or what is she exhibiting that I am envious of that makes me want that for myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
No, that's
just
tough.
allows me to point the direction,
Yeah,
whatever.
that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Thank you. I'm going to have to check that one out. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you listening, if you would like to learn more about Elizabeth or sign up for a call with her, we'll have the link in our show notes and to her website, and you can find her all over social as well. And so, thank you so much for being here. And with that, folks, it's a wrap. We'll see you next week. Thanks
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.
See the colors